And I'm even going to remember to silence my phone, which is, pretty good for 1 second into the stream. Excellent. Good to see everybody today. We got lots of people waiting here today, which I'm super excited about. Hopefully everybody's already taken a little sneak peek at these findings here, but we're going to dig into all of it during today's live stream. But if you would, let me know if you're watching, if you can hear and see us okay. That will lower my anxiety and I'll know that everything's working. And Amber, I'll let you say something so everybody can hear you. How's your day going so far?
It's going pretty well. I was up way earlier than I normally was. I know you're like a morning person, but I am not a morning person. So,
yeah,
but I had a little bit of, I
got a message from you. I think I messaged you
at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
I am not a 5 a.m. person. That was still my Monday. I had a hard time hitting publish on that article because I kept being like, what else should I say? So I'm so glad that I am here with you today so I can say all the other things, because at some point you just have to let it go out into the world. And if people have questions today that are really valid ones, I might say I have to go add some FAQs or something at the end of that.
Sure. Well, questions are great. Just blatant criticism with no looking into anything. That's what I can't tolerate. That's what'll make me angry. And as we wait for everybody to get on stream, I think this is a good place to interject this. I actually had something happen to me this morning on the way to taking my kiddo to school that made me think of what you're probably going through today with publishing this. So today was back to school for our kids. So got them all out of the house. Woohoo, this is great. But on the first day, my daughter in middle school decided I would drive her to school rather than her take the bus. So we get in the car, we start driving through the neighborhood, and she's looking at her bus stop, seeing which kids are out there, and we're driving through the neighborhood, and we get to the next bus stop and there's some other kids there, and we get to the next bus stop and there's other kids there, and we see the bus coming. And she gets so upset. She's like, why is the bus coming from that direction? That makes no sense. They should come this way first so they can pick up us and blah, blah, blah. And all she was thinking about is she wants to be the last one to get on the bus in the morning so she can get out as late as possible. And she wants to be the first one off the bus so she can get home as quickly as possible, right? So she was ranting about the route the bus was taking. And I stopped her and I said, Avery, think, how much time have you spent studying the map and the route the bus has to take and where the bus is coming from the bus barn and where they have to go after and what's going to be the most fuel efficient when they're loading kids on? Like, how much time have you spent on that? She's like, well, none. I'm like, well, how much time do you think they spent on that? She said, I don't know. I said, well, it's more than you, right? She's like, well, yeah. Like, well, that's it. Maybe their bus route does suck. That's very possible. It is a public school, I'll give them some credit though, that they at least spent some time thinking about it and going through, and like, there's other things to consider more than when Avery gets on and off the bus, right? So I think that's a good parallel to what we got going on here. You had to go out and test a bunch of websites accessibility. I'm imagining with page builders that you're not super familiar with. You've been in WordPress a long time. You know how all this works. I'm sure you can work your way around it quite a bit. But I imagine you spent a lot of time thinking about how we're going to test these things, how we're going to keep the test consistent from one page builder to another, even though they all call it something different and it all works a little bit different. Some of them are nested components and some of them you got to build them all yourself. There's a ton of considerations, not even to mention the fact that you know way more about accessibility than probably everybody on this call. No offense to everybody here, but I even, I immediately opened it up and got butt hurt. And I was like, no, you can do this and generate blocks. And then you're like, well, what about this and this? I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I should just shut up and listen to you. So I'm going to give myself that same advice that I gave my daughter this morning. So hopefully that's a good warmer for today's conversation and hopefully a little bit of validation for you.
Well, that is really nice of you to say. I don't think everyone has to just shut up and listen to what I have to say, but I do appreciate the feedback, and I know that it's going to come. If you think I got something wrong, you can say that and we can discuss it. I will definitely say, listen to this conversation that we're going to have here today. And you can also watch the Meetup video that's linked where I explained a lot more about some of these things, which might also provide some context before you yell at me.
There you go. Okay. Let's calm down before we do any yelling, right? Okay, perfect. So let's set this up. So Amber, there's probably somebody on here that doesn't know you yet. So why don't you first give a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do for everybody watching?
Sure. So I am the CEO of a company called Equalize Digital. We are an organization that focuses exclusively on web accessibility. We have a WordPress plugin called Accessibility Checker that can be used to audit websites. It also provides automated fixes for some problems. And we do audits, remediation. We have blind people on our team who are available for user testing. Outside of my company, I also am the board president for the WordPress Accessibility Day nonprofit, which is a 24-hour conference that happens in the fall. This year, it's October 15th through 16th, totally free on Zoom, all about WordPress accessibility. And I participate in the core WordPress accessibility team, and I run the official WordPress accessibility meetup. So I do a lot with accessibility all day long.
Enough credentials. Yeah, you nailed it. Awesome. So what we're doing here today is talking about a tiny little project you've been working on where you've gone through and tested the accessibility of a bunch of, we're just going to call them page builders. Some are themes, some are page builders, things that build websites inside WordPress. So you did this last year and then have done it again this year. I'm going to post a link to it in the chat here for anybody who wants to grab it. But why don't you tell us about the idea of this project and what exactly it is that you did?
Yeah, so the biggest goal with the project was to be able in the beginning to answer the question when people would ask me at meetups during the WordPress Accessibility Day conference, when they were just talking to me at WordCamps, which page builder or block library or website building tool is the best starting point. And all of the websites we had built in recent years were all totally custom. So I hadn't used many of these tools. So I could never answer that, honestly. I would just had to say, I don't know. And last year I was like, I'm sick of having to say, I don't know. So I'm going to try and figure this out. So last year we tested 10 of them. We got a lot of positive feedback, both from the builders, from people in the community, plus a lot of requests. What about XYZ? So this year we expanded to test 19 different builders. And then we also tested WordPress core as a base. I call it a baseline. I can't include it in because there's a bunch of features in WordPress core or missing from WordPress core that you need to have to build a website. And so you're probably going to choose something else on this list in addition to having just WordPress core. And so really the goal for doing this is to provide a look at what builder presents the best starting point out of the box. It's not necessarily to say you can't build accessible websites with one that scores bad. You can build accessible websites with anything. It's just some make it easier than others, and some require less work on your part than others, which is especially true if someone is, I know a lot of people here are probably developers or agency owners. Like they know how to write CSS. They know how to write JavaScript to fix issues. But a lot of people who build WordPress websites don't have those skills. And so if they had to pick something off the shelf, which one is going to get them there fastest and easiest?
I love that. And I think it's a good point to make that you can take any of these, no matter where they ended up on your list as far as ranking, and make an accessible website. You can also take the best ones and make an inaccessible website. So the tool is only part of the equation, and a lot of it has to do with the person who's wielding the tool. So learning about accessibility is obviously important as well. No matter which tool you pick, you're going to have considerations to make anytime you start putting content on a web page. There's just a lot that goes into it, you know. Definitely. So how did you, you got it down to 19 builders. Tell us about the things that you tested with all these different builders.
Yep. So basically we have two different groups of things that we tested. So the first group is what I call components. So these include the navigation. If they had the ability to have like a search button or something that would expand a modal-based search or drop-down based search in the header. So header search, accordions, I'm going to miss some, but accordions, tabs, icon lists, carousels or sliders, loop blocks. So something that would just show like latest posts if you wouldn't put 3 of your latest blog posts on your homepage or something like that. So those kind of just like core things that you would need to build a business website is what I'm thinking about, which is why WordPress core fails because it doesn't have most of these things. And then we also tested, and this was another area where we really expanded this year, was forms. Previously, we didn't do forms because I love form plugins, and I think you should use a form plugin because it's going to give you so much more than your page builder form is. However, as I was thinking about this and thinking about the reality of whatever they might call it in a builder, but like a theme kit or a starter template, a lot of them from builders have the forms in it, and a lot of more base level WordPress users may never go out and find a form plugin if they're like, oh, well, I've got a contact form in my builder right here on the contact page that was created for me. So I realized I couldn't keep ignoring forms even though I wanted to. So we tested forms this year, and then we also test against the WordPress core accessibility ready requirements for themes.
Excellent. And I think that does make a huge difference in which builder you're choosing. All of them have a different combination of elements and all that kind of stuff. So trying to figure out like what are the basic things that most websites are going to have is a huge part of it. Now, I will mention to everybody watching this live, if you have questions, drop those in the chat. I'm going to star all of those so I can come back and get answers to those. So feel free to drop them in as you're thinking about them, and we'll pull all those up towards the end of this. Now, one thing, and you know what, Amber, this is something we should have done pre-production. So we're doing a production meeting on the fly here. I'm not sure. Do you want to share your screen and walk us through any of this at some point? Or you want me to share my screen and I can scroll through if that's easier?
No, I would be totally happy to do that. Should I do that now?
Okay. If you want to go ahead and press the buttons inside of our little thing, you can go ahead and get that ready, and then I can put it on the screen whenever we're ready to talk about it. But as you do that, I was thinking as I was going through all of this report, one thing that stood out to me is there's probably like a severity to these passes and failures, right? Like there's some things that are going to be an accessibility fail, and it's going to completely stop anybody from using a keyboard to navigate, maybe, let's say, to be able to use the website at all. So how did you think of this in terms of like severity of the issues?
Yeah, so that is a good point. I did note in the report that for our purposes, the way we do when we go through, we bullet out, and we'll show this in a minute, like a specific thing that we're going to look for. And then we basically gave builders a pass. It did it perfectly, fail, did not do it. And then in some instances, we tried not to do this, but in some instances we put a concern, which is that it mostly passes, or it passes enough, but maybe there's a setting in the builder that might mislead users to, like, they won't notice that they have to do this. Autocomplete attributes on forms is a good example. If they don't by default put the email autocomplete on the email field, the setting is there. It could be added, but a lot of non-technical users would never know to do that. So that's like a concern, because it would probably be better if it was just there by default, and then maybe you had the option to turn it off if you didn't want it. So we gave them those sorts of tests, and then we just summed up and totaled, but we aren't weighting it. So there are 100% issues that are far more critical. For example, missing field labels on form fields is going to block many, many people from submitting forms, in contrast to missing list semantics on a group of blog posts. That's more of an inconvenience for a screen reader user, not something that would stop them from being able to actually do a critical function on the website. We did not weight it. It's something I've thought about. Maybe next year I might do that. I have to go through every cell on my sheet and give it a multiplier. If I do that, it's a lot of Google spreadsheets work. So I think that is a thing that is worth noting with these rankings, particularly with a lot of the builders in the middle. Some of them aren't even a full percentage point off of one another. So you really do have to look at the specific issues where they failed, because it's possible that one that looks worse, builder B that looks worse than builder A, might actually be better than builder A if you go compare where they failed and what things they failed, rather than the raw number.
Sure. The context is important.
Does that kind of answer the question on severity?
No, that definitely helps. And that's what I was going through as I was going through, I'm a Generate Blocks user. So I was going through just studying where did it have some issues on it. And there were some things I noticed. I'm like, oh, well, I know I could just change this and that fixes that. And so that kind of leads me, before we start looking at all the results, I'd like to get people in the right headspace. Like, what do you think us as agencies and developers, what should we take away from this report? Like, we're probably not going to change builders unless we're, kind of using a builder and it's last on the list and we were thinking about changing anyways. Maybe this changes our mind. But in most cases, people are already kind of ingrained in an ecosystem. So they're probably not going to switch. So what can they take away from this to use this as like a positive experience to start building better websites?
Sure. So I think obviously there are some things where you're going to look at it and you're going to say, I don't care that it fails that. For example, default colors in the builder have to pass contrast to get an accessibility ready tag. But I would say 99.99% of the time when you start with a builder, you go change all the default colors. So from the purposes of an agency or a website developer, who cares if they fail color contrast? I know I'm not going to keep those colors, right? So I think what you need to do is look at the areas where it failed and figure out what might need to change about your processes. And then I think the other thing that is important to assess on there is, one, how responsive is the builder to fixing things that literally fundamentally have to be fixed in the code because there's not a setting for it. So for example, if you are using one of the builders that has accordions that are all just divs and not buttons and literally cannot be operated with a keyboard, this is a critical failure that will stop people from being able to access your content. You don't necessarily have to abandon that instantly. The first thing I would do is go to them and say, hey, can you fix this? If they can't fix it, then the next question you probably have to ask yourself is, how comfortable am I with creating filters or PHP templates to override them? Or can I write JavaScript that I can put in the footer of my websites that will patch these things? If you like to play around with AI, it's a lot easier to do that stuff this year than it was last year when this report came out. If you are an advanced developer, that stuff is like no problem. And you're like, I can patch it one time. I can write my own Builder XYZ accessibility plugin that I just have pre-installed every time I build with these, and you're good to go. But if you are more of a designer who builds with tools out of the box, what I just said probably sounds terrifying.
Right.
So I think like you have to figure out where your skill set is and then start going through the issues and make a plan for, these are the settings that I know I need to toggle on, or the things that I need to change every time I build a website. And these are the things that I might need to patch one time and just have them in a plugin that's like my must-use plugin that I always put on all my client sites. Or if that list is too big, then you might start to look at changing your starter.
Yeah, I feel good with your answer there because I did a lot of those things this morning when I got my hands on this report. I went through and found all the things that are going to affect my builder. I made a list of them and I emailed them to the developer of the plugin and said, here's what they found. Just wanted to make sure you were aware of all these things. He was super responsive, happy to jump in and start taking a look at some of this stuff. So there's some things on that list that I just identified, like, I cannot fix this. The theme needs to fix this in order for it to work. But there were some things where I went, okay, well, by default, when you drag this widget onto the screen, it does this one thing, but really we need it to do the other. So I just made a note for myself. Anytime you use the accordion, make sure to change it to a button instead of a div, which is just a drop-down option in there. I don't know why it defaults to div, but it does. I need to know every time to change that to button. So there's some things like that where you can just make yourself some notes on what to do, and then you'll at least be using it right from that point forward. So hopefully that will be helpful for everybody. All right, so let's share your. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the other thing too on there is this is a big thing I always tell people is that there are going to be things that failed that, I mean, a lot of us refuse to put sliders on websites. Who cares if the slider block in your builder sucks at accessibility if you literally never use it, right? So I think that's another way of looking at it. The forms might be bad, but if you always use your favorite form plugin, who cares? Obviously it'd be great if they fixed it for everyone, but it might not really matter for you. So.
Absolutely. And there were things like that on my list. I'm like, well, I don't do it that way, so that's not applicable to my builds, so that's helpful too. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share your screen now and put it on the screen for everybody else so they can see what we got here. I'm going to see if I can maybe stuff us in the corner. I wish I could stack us, but it doesn't look like I can. So
I can
be
zoom
conscious
in a
that
little.
it looks like your browser's not filling the window. I don't know if you can make that wider. Is it maybe not filling up your screen?
Yeah, it's not. I'm on
Okay.
a
Yeah.
really big, that's my really big extra monitor. Hold on.
Yeah. You might still be able to zoom in a little bit more.
I'll
I know your
zoom.
website zooms well. Just be conscious that maybe the bottom fourth of the page, our faces are covering up. So maybe if you're talking about something, keep it more towards the top of the screen.
Sounds good. Yeah. So you want me to just high level on what we have? Is that
yeah? Tell us, kind of walk us through this article, because I know you put a lot of thought into presenting all this information that I warned you people are going to scroll right past and just look at the final list. But tell us what's here, so when we have these questions before we go yell at Amber, we know where we can find this information about how you've done all this.
For sure. Yep. Okay. So we've got a table of contents that I'm just going to scroll right on by. There is a link here where you can watch it jumps over to Zoom and you can watch the meetup from last night where I described a bunch of this stuff, but I think you're going to get it all here today. But we start out by talking about testing methodology, and I'll highlight some of the things specifically that we did. And I'll also show you, I'm going to pop back and forth a little bit. So sure. I do have this year, this is different. I have public sites available. So you can go look at exactly what was tested for every builder. And if I'll click on the Kadence one, and we'll jump around to a couple of them, but all of them have identical content as much as was humanly possible. On the home page of them, you can actually see what theme is active and what versions of the plugins are active. This is important. This is a static site. We aren't updating them. So this is whatever version it was when we did our test and our report. It is not necessarily the current version of that specific things. Like you'll notice some of them are out of date. Beaver Builder, for example, has a beta that's not publicly available because they were like, hey, we've been doing a bunch of accessibility fixes. We test this version. And I was like, sure, I'm happy to do that. So it's important to note that. And then there are specific lists of pages that we looked at, but we made sure that they all had identical content as far as all of the blog posts that are on there are identical. And we did some really specific things. This was the post that we use for our post single testing. Like we made sure when doing this that we didn't put any accessibility problems in to the posts. They all have like the same link. If we have headings, they're all following the right heading semantics, that kind of thing, mostly because our first test was we did bulk scanning with accessibility checker so that we could get a comparison report, which I might be able to show here in a minute. And we didn't want to have a bunch of false positives. So we made sure that they all started with the exact same point. And then the components can be found on the components page. And this basically shows you everything that was tested. And again, we did some really specific things. Like you'll notice every accordion has a link in it. And that's so we could test with our tab key. If there was a link in an accordion and the accordion was collapsed, did it get focused anyway, or was it correctly hidden? So we did a lot of things like that where we're thinking, what are problems we know might exist? And then we put content there that would be able to surface those problems. So you can sort of see how we built out. They're not all exactly the same. I tried to make the same kind of form, for example, like I tried to include a checkbox and a radio and a select and a date field and name and email and a mix of required or not, but not all builders support having different types of field types and that kind of stuff. So some of them are a little different when it comes to the components, but the rest of the content is all the same. And so I will note in your final Google sheet that has all this information, when things weren't available for testing, it's noted in there that like, well, we didn't test this because it doesn't exist. Yes. Yeah. So I have some notes that sort of explain how we did that setup here. which I've mostly highlighted. A good thing that's worth noting is we're not using any third-party components. I heard this a lot last year from Bricks. Like people will be like, well, no one uses the core Bricks accordion. Everyone just uses XYZ add-on for Bricks, which is way better and is accessible. And I was just like, I don't care. The core, whatever, should be accessible. And they did fix that. So I'm not trying to rag on Bricks because the Bricks team like put a lot of effort in, and they're one of the ones that had a big improvement this year, which is awesome. But like, I think that's really important. I do feel really strongly that page builder core components should be accessible out of the box, and you shouldn't have to go buy an additional add-on to make your site accessible.
Agreed.
Our testing process, we had 2 people testing this year. Myself and our accessibility specialist, Maria, did testing. I will tell everyone we put over 200 hours into this. It was a lot of time. So this was not like the WebAIM Million is this report everyone's heard of, which is really cool. But it's literally just WebAIM scanning home pages with their Wave AI tool. This is not just automated testing. This is manual testing. We used some automated tools. We used some browser extensions to help us, like headings map and landmark navigation. We did manual keyboard testing. She tested with NVDA. I tested with VoiceOver. We tested with Zoom. We turned on our reduce motion setting in our operating systems to see if it respected that. So we did a ton of manual testing as well. And then we have
just don't total up how much that costs the company.
I know. Actually, we recorded a podcast episode, me and Chris and Steve, and they hadn't known how much time we put in, where we were like teasing this was coming. And then I was like, do you guys want to know, like in the middle of the podcast, how many hours we put in so far? And we weren't done. So it was over 100, but it wasn't close to what our final number was. And I told them, and they were just like, what?
Yeah, podcast is over. Amber's got to get
so
back
what
to
I'm
work.
saying is, everyone please go share this report so that my business partners don't think I wasted our company's time and money.
I'm doing my part here.
Yeah. So we did all of this in this Google spreadsheet, which on that page, you can request access to this, and then you'll get it. You'll get the email link for the different test sites if you want to go poke around on them. But we have a summary, and then we have our individual components. So this is an example on the navigation tag, and we've got down the left like a list of things that we checked, and then we have each builder across, and then you can see if something wasn't applicable. So for example, Green Shift and Grade, they just use the core WordPress block for navigation. They don't have their own navigation block. Well, it's not fair to give them credit for that because they didn't build it, so they just got NAs. So we go across and we do all of that. And then basically at the bottom of each tab, you can see a total of the number of things that passed. This is, let me see, maybe slightly easier to see.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. All right. So you can see the total number of things that passed, total concerns, total fails, how many were not applicable. And then we calculate the percentage of what was actually applicable. And that is what we rate them on, because I don't want to, if we just said, oh, we're going to score them based on the most things passed, well, that basically penalizes a builder that doesn't include a certain block because they have fewer blocks to get scored on. So we're just trying to figure out when they do code something, how good of a job do they do is basically what it is. So we've got the components. We have the same sort of thing for the accessibility ready requirements. And then the summary basically summarizes those all. And I will point out, WordPress core did not get a 100%. There are a couple of things that I'm thinking I might go open some GitHub issues for or track tickets, but probably GitHub issues. So
they're going to ask you to get in there and fix it, though. You're just creating more work for yourself.
Yeah, I know.
Be a contributor now.
I only open issues on those repos. I am not a good enough JavaScript developer. No one wants me contributing to Gutenberg. I'm telling you, it would be bad. So.
Well, it's definitely comprehensive here. Lots of things tested. I imagine you went through all of these builders quite a bit. And I think what most people are probably interested in is, how did all these builders do? So do you want to talk about maybe some of the highlights, or how do you want to
Yeah,
approach what each
maybe
builder ended up doing?
we can scroll real fast and hopefully not make anyone motion sick. And get down here. Let's see if I can zoom out a little bit and try and get them all. We'll see. All right. So, yes. So Kadence came in first. They actually had a 100% score. I will say, I said this last night during our meetup, the Stellar team pays us to audit a lot of their products. So they have been really sprinting on a lot of accessibility, which may or may not seem like an unfair advantage, except for the fact that we pretty much, with the exception of forms, tested all the same things last year. So all of these builders had access to what we were going to test on and had a full year's warning that they could have also been sprinting on accessibility. So
they could have all hired you, but only
they
one
also
that
could have
I
all
know
hired
of
me,
did.
or they
Sure.
could have hired some other accessibility consultant. So
Sure.
It is what it is. And as we noted, like, this wasn't a thorough test of every single component. It is entirely possible that there is something in Kadence theme or in Kadence box that I didn't look at that isn't a 100%. So you have to take all of these numbers with a grain of salt. GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks came in second at 81%. Grade was 77. Elementor was 75. Elementor was our number 2 last year. This could be that it got a little bit worse. There's a couple of components like the way that they have updated that I don't love how they updated, like keyboard interaction or things like that on it. It could also just be because we added additional checks for things we didn't look at last year.
Yeah, and there's new players in the field too that you didn't test last year that are now inside here, like
that
Grade,
are now
I don't
in
believe
here.
was
Yeah,
on the
so
list
it
last
is
year, so.
a little harder. I'm hoping next year it'll be a little more apples to apples straight comparison if we do all these same builders again. At the very bottom, we have Divi, Live Composer, and Brizzy. Something that is worth mentioning for 2 of these that I thought is really interesting is Brizzy and Seed Prod. They don't have a companion theme. We tried our best to always use a theme by that company because we wanted to be only judging them on what they can control. We don't want to pick a random theme from the directory that they have no control over in case it added problems. For these ones, we ended up just testing them in 2025. 2025 has skip links, it has landmarks, it has a lot of really great features. But when you start to use these builders, they actually remove all of those accessibility features. So I think this is something that is worth noting for some of these builders down low, is that even if you choose an accessibility ready theme, they might be degrading the accessibility that already exists from the theme. Oxygen is another one, and that was Oxygen Classic, by the way, not the beta version that's currently out. It, I think, disables your theme completely. So even if you had a theme with skip links, now you might not have them. So you need to know to go build those. And if you don't know how to build those, then you're in trouble. So the other thing that is probably worth pointing out is that a lot of these ones in the middle in particular are only different by a very small margin. It might not even be statistically significant. And as we talked about before, you can't just take this number at face value. You got to go see where they failed, because this order could be wrong if you were trying to weight it by severity.
Right. And like you said too, if the slider carousel is something that had a bunch of fails on it, but you never use that, well then, your actual percentage of this would be quite a bit higher because you wouldn't be getting fails on all those things, which is interesting.
Correct.
And something like Oxygen, where Oxygen gives you tons of control over the code, right? Like you can actually go in there and manipulate just about everything you put on the page. Then there's some other builders where you don't have that flexibility. You get the drop downs or whatever they give you, right? So that makes a difference too. Like some of these things are just going to be geared more towards developers that are going to hopefully know to go make these changes or do things in the right way. Whereas some of the other ones, you're just talking about somebody coming in new to WordPress basically and dropping a website on the canvas. So makes a big difference too.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I wrote that was worth highlighting. What did we talk about? We talked about that. So legacy builders, I think newer builders tend to do better, but it's not a guarantee. There were a couple of newer ones, like Bricks was one that is a lot newer than a lot of these. And last year they did pretty poorly, but this year they've done better, but they're still not up at the top. But in general, I would say newer builders tend to do better. The other thing interesting was up at the top there, a lot of those are block library plugins with themes, not full UI builders.
Gotcha.
With the exception of Elementor. So that is kind of an interesting thing. I'm not sure totally what that means. Like, is it easier to make an accessible thing, or is it just that those people happen to be better at writing HTML code? I don't know. It's kind of interesting. But I do think it's worth calling out. Beaver Builder improved quite a bit. They went from 48% to 68%. Bricks went from 50 to 63. GeneratePress from 67 to 81. So we have seen signs of growth. And again, like, I don't think you have to totally freak out if yours is only in the middle or like is down towards the bottom. I mean, if it's the very bottom, and I will tell you, some of these I used them and I was like, I don't know why anyone would use this, because the editor experience was frustrating for me. I can tell you how many times I had to go to ChatGPT and be like, why is this not working? Or how do I do this thing? Like, that was a bunch of the hours. I was just trying to figure out how to build web pages in these builders. But I think, like, ultimately what matters is the builder responsive, and are they willing to make improvements? Because what really matters, again, is accessibility. It's a journey, it's a process. It's not like this one-time thing. And so are they going to continue to move up? And if so, then it's probably a builder you want to stick with.
I'm curious, because you have a lot of these probably hard conversations with people who spend a lot of time building a website or building a product, and then you have to tell them, well, actually you did a bunch of this stuff wrong. And obviously you don't want to hurt people's feelings, but how should we approach talking with our page builder of choice about this report, and in a way that's going to encourage them and try to help them make some improvements on this, and not just get defensive about, Amber said I didn't do a good job?
Well, I would encourage them, if you're reaching out to them, to like get the full spreadsheet and, actually look at the data, look at the testing sites, so that they can see how they were set up and how they were configured. I am totally open, by the way, if someone is like, well, you clearly did this wrong, or you missed this really obvious setting. I think in a week or two, I might come put a little update to this. So I'm totally open to builders reaching out to me about that. But I would say, I don't know, I haven't really ever had a negative response from any plugin, not just page builders, but I mean, we've reached out to EDD, we've reached out to Affiliate WP, we've reached out to just a variety, like the events calendar, like a variety of different plugins that we use on our own website, and said, hey, can you fix this thing? And usually, as long as you're friendly and you're like, I really want my website to be compliant, I can't figure out how to do this with a setting. Can you add a setting, or can you fix the underlying code? Most of them are open to that and positive. I've never gotten like a, no, we're not going to fix that. Sometimes I get a, well, we'll put it on our priority list without a timeline. That's a little bit more frustrating. But I would say, as long as you're positive about it and friendly, usually they're pretty happy to respond. I don't know. We'll see. All of the builders here that gave me their zips, which is pretty much all of them, I also offered that I would have a call with them if they had questions. So I think that's a good sign that they were like, yes, we're willing to participate in this. Here's a zip of our plugin, that they might fix it.
Well, I do think reaching out to folks is important. Obviously, I don't want everybody to just go rant and rave at whoever your builder is about getting something wrong. Like, they're all human. But I think the advocacy part is really important, because most of us building websites are sighted, and most of us are using a keyboard and using a mouse to navigate around, right? But that's not how everybody experiences the web. And since it's a smaller minority that are using alternate ways to view these websites, there's obviously less advocacy for them. So we kind of have to be the advocates in that. And I imagine that if one person wrote them and said, hey, this thing's not right, maybe they chuck it on a to-do list somewhere. But if 10 people write them and say, hey, this thing's really bugging us and it's not working right, it probably moves up the list, right? So like I said, not to go be rude to them, but just for us all to show that this is important to us as their customers.
I think too, it is interesting. Actually, people with disabilities is the biggest minority group around the world. So the stat from the World Health Organization is 1 in 5. The CDC has a stat that's 1 in 4. And it's billions of people that might need some sort of assistive technology, not necessarily all blind, but they might, need captions or some other thing. It is a very large audience. They might use just a keyboard to navigate, even though they can see, but they can't use a mouse because they have Parkinson's or they have hand tremors for some reason. So maybe highlighting that is important. I will say, and I would hope that these builders are aware of already, but if they're not aware of the European Accessibility Act, and I know you and I did a whole live stream on that, which they could send over to them, or we have an article on our website that lists out all of the laws and all of the fines. And ultimately, builders that are hoping to be in that European market are going to have to start paying attention to this, because the reality is that if people can't easily build accessible websites with that builder, they're going to move somewhere else. And so perhaps sharing with them, hey, I'm in this market, or my clients are in this market and they have to meet a European Accessibility Act. And if you can't fix XYZ, then we're going to have to go to a different solution. That might be motivating to them, and giving them the reason so they can go look at the law themselves and be like, oh yeah, this does matter.
Yeah, but I think it does have to happen in some kind of numbers, which is why I just wanted to encourage everybody to maybe reach out if you found
more than one person.
Yes, more than one person.
Lots of people
don't just assume that somebody else wrote your page builder about this. You can do it too. I want to ask you, and I want to get everybody queued up here. I've got 7 questions starred that I'm going to ask you here in a second. But if anybody else has questions about any of this, we got Amber. Now's the time to do it. What were the biggest surprises when you did this? Obviously, you did it last year, so you had some kind of idea of how all these page builders were doing. But what were the things that really stood out to you in this year's results?
Well, I'm still surprised at how few slider libraries allow you to add a pause button to an autoplay slider. It just seems so easy and no-brainer. But I think only 3 out of all of the builders had a pause button as an option when you turn on autoplay, which I think is interesting. A lot of them actually use the same library, so maybe that's why. And I'll say that was an interesting thing that surprised me last year maybe, but like even seeing it expanded this year, is a lot of them are relying on the same open source JavaScript libraries to build some of their components. And so it's almost like they should turn around and report these issues upstream, and then that could be fixed. And then maybe it would fix every builder that uses that exact same library, which is kind of interesting. What else surprised me? I mean, I was surprised at how hard some of the builders were to use. Some of the new ones, because last year I had mostly tested ones that I had seen before, because I got a lot of them last year because we had clients. So I went in and FTP'd and downloaded the zip off their website, right? And stole it, I guess, for testing. So I had seen it and used it before. This year, I tried a bunch of new ones, some of which I was like, oh, this is kind of intuitive. I get this. And there were others that just frustrated me to no end. So there are a million different ways to build a WordPress website. And I definitely was in a bubble of, this is the way we do it. And I hadn't really gotten out of it. But it is an interesting experiment, I think, to just get outside of your normal bubble and go try something totally new.
Yeah, I know when I'll pick up clients who had a website built somewhere else and I go into it, even if they're using the same builder as I use, sometimes I'm like, how did these people do this? Like, this is crazy. What were they thinking?
Why did they make this choice?
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of that for sure. One more question. We'll get to everybody's questions here. How did you decide which builders to test? Obviously, I think you said 10 last year, 19 this year. And then the first thing everybody says is, what about X builder? Why didn't you test this builder? How did you come up with your list of 19?
So it was a little bit based on, in the beginning, I went to WordPress.org and I like searched the term page builder to see what came up last year. This year, we were a lot more looking at things like install count. So I have this in our summary sheet at the top of the spreadsheet. I went and found both the number of sites live on Built With and also if theme active installs and plugin active installs. I used that to generate an initial list. A few of them, like the Brizzy, I had never heard of Brizzy until we did that little game show that we did. And I was like,
yeah.
So then it made me like add it to my list for later. I should go and like find this one. And then, so that was it. I did go post in our WordPress accessibility Facebook group before we were gearing up to do this. And I said, please tell me what builders you'd like me to test. And so a lot of people provided suggestions there, like Green Shift. That was one that someone asked for there. I will say, I know the Builderis team really wanted us to test. I think that's how you say it. Builderis.
Yeah, I think so.
I had a lot of difficulties with being able to set up a testing site for it. And with everything else going on, it got a little bit delayed. And then they tried to help me, like they logged in and like set it up, but then a few things weren't apples to apples. So then I went to go try and edit it and I had difficulties and we ended up saying, unfortunately, we aren't going to have time to test this in the time that we have. But they also only have, I think, like 60 active installs. So for me, I was a little bit like, it wasn't as high of a priority as testing something that has hundreds of thousands or millions of installs. Because a big way to think about this, right? Like if we're talking about accordions or some other major component that you know probably almost everyone who built a website with that builder used, if it's broken on 500, like looking at Avada, and I don't actually think their accordions are bad, but off the top of my head, they might be. But as an example, not specifically to say that, 500,000 websites are using that. 500,000 websites have an accessibility problem. If they go and fix that, then 500,000 websites get better, which is huge and amazing. And so for us, really, like that's where these active install counts came in with some motivation, you know, like let's try to make sure we prioritize doing ones with higher install counts. So like grade people asked for, but I only did it at the very end when I knew we had time to do it because it only has 300 installs. And I was like, if I'm going to skip one, it's going to be one with lower install count.
Sure. So next year, for all the people, we're already planning your next year one. You said it though, so I don't feel too bad, but maybe you should do it every other year. Next time when you do this, if somebody really, really wants to have their page builder tested, how could they make that request to you?
Well, if you're in our Facebook group, before we do it again, I will definitely put a post so you can join the WordPress Accessibility Facebook group. That is a good group to be in anyway.
That's a great answer.
That's probably the best way, because if you message me now, I might not remember it next year.
Perfect. So. You'll put a call to action out next year inside of your
yes.
Facebook group. So make sure you're over there inside that Facebook group. All right, perfect. Let's go through these questions. I'm going to put just our face maybe back on the screen, and I'll put these questions up here. I know Zach's got a bunch of them, so they're like half Zach questions. Where is the best place to submit questions/concerns to Amber? I'm guessing this is in relation to what your findings are.
Oh yeah, if you disagree with me.
Well, maybe if they think maybe something wasn't tested or built the right way.
That is a really great question. I probably should have known the answer to this before that. How about in the Facebook group, I will go start a thread where you can post questions or feedback to me in our WordPress Accessibility Facebook group.
Perfect. And I will grab the link to that. I don't have it handy, but I will grab the link to that and make sure it's shared inside the stream, or ping me inside of the right inside the tab Facebook group, and we'll make sure everybody has it. All right. Pixel Pumpkin. Oh, I'd love to see a report on popular form plugins compare in terms of accessibility, or does this already exist?
So I do not have one. I have not done this. However, at WordPress Accessibility Meetup, Jen Harris, who is amazing, she's in the admin bar. She did a talk for us along with Kevin. I'm copying the link now. If I put this in the chat, can you pass this out to folks?
Yeah.
But she gave a talk about how accessible are WordPress forms by default. And she has done a test kind of like what I did, where she put a bunch of different forms together, tried to create the same form and tested across them. So you can watch it and there's a summary. And does it say what in the write-up? Probably. Yeah, so she tested Contact Form 7, Fluent Forms, Formidable, Forminator, Gravity Forms, Ninja Forms, and WS Forms in this particular talk.
Perfect. That's a great answer. All right. Let me unstar the old ones. All right. Another one from Zach. My biggest question here about is when Equalize Digital decided to use a provided theme versus not, or using a provided feature versus not. We kind of covered that in there, but maybe if you'd want to briefly say that again.
Yeah, so if it was a plugin only, then I first looked to see if the theme, if the company had a custom theme. So like Beaver Builder, it uses their starter theme. And I think the theme or plugin is active on there. So I did try to do that because I only wanted to score them on things they can control. And then if one didn't exist, then I just used default 2025.
Perfect. All right. Dennis wants you to do a little bit more work. Are there any guides or good checklists to go along with this?
Oh, yes. I have to, I feel like I should have more of these links up, but I can find this real quick and give you a link. We have a, what we call a shift left checklist for accessibility. And right here. So what this checklist is, it's like a Google Doc, so you can copy it and do whatever you want with it. But it's like 5 pages and it breaks it all up from like every phase of a website project: discovery, content collection, design, development, QA, post-launch, all that kind of things, like what you need to do from an accessibility standpoint.
Love it. And like I was talking about earlier, when I got my hands on the Google Sheet for Amber's report, I just went through and pulled out all the ones in my builder and then made myself notes. So I kind of made my own checklist or whatever things I need to watch out for. There wasn't a whole lot of them, so it didn't take a ton of time.
Yeah, this isn't builder specific. It's more like, as a web agency, what do you need to think about? So obviously you'd want to come in and modify this for your own builder. The other thing I would say is like our plugin, including just our free plugin, not even necessarily our pro plugin. If you have a base install that is blank, but has like a lot of your plugins default set up with configurations that you normally do for all clients, you could put our free plugin on there and go scan and find a lot of issues and fix them in your base. And then you don't have to fix them every time you build a website.
Right. So you put all that into like your starter site, and then every time you start a new project, you clone your starter site, and a lot of those things are already taken care of. So you're not doing them over and over again. Excellent. All right. Pixel Pumpkin wants to know if there's anything like this on Squarespace or Wix. She didn't see one, but this comes up with clients and potential clients. I know you're probably not going to go test all these other builders, but do you have any experience with them? Do you have any idea where they would rank on this list?
All right. So last year, I got hired by a YouTuber to, I wonder if I could stop. Can you stop sharing my screen for a minute?
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if I can find this. If I can find it, I will share it with someone. But backstory while I'm trying to do this is I got hired by a YouTuber to test a bunch of these other builders, and I built her a report like this for them. And she paid me, so I was like, okay, whatever. She never ended up, I don't think, making YouTube. I gave her recordings, like all this stuff, but I don't think she ever ended up publishing it, which is odd. But because it's been more than a year now, I feel comfortable. If I can find that spreadsheet, and if I can't find it in a second while we're talking, I'll give it to you later, Kyle. You can share it out with the group and put it in, and so people can find it. So I did something kind of like this. She set up all those stagings. It was like Wix, Squarespace, I forget all the different names, but there's a couple of different like proprietary builders that she set up staging sites for and had me test like this.
Do you have any recollection? Were they good, terrible, in the middle?
So Shopify and Squarespace were the best of the ones I tested, which makes sense because I think they have more of a e-commerce focus. Like Shopify in particular probably pays a lot more attention to accessibility laws because a lot of them touch on e-commerce. I don't remember where they all fell.
Fair enough. And we can always pull that later if you do get access to it. Not a problem. All right. Zach is wondering. Oh, good.
It has
Zach,
Webflow, Showit, Wix, Squarespace, and Shopify on it.
Ooh, interesting. That would be great.
It's like a year old, but here's the link. People can go look at it.
Perfect. Copying it now, putting it in the chat. All right. Let's see. We got another one from Zach here. If Amber were to guess what the ranking would be if severity included, do you think there would be any major jumps? So we kind of talked about you didn't really rank the severity of some of the failures. Yeah, you didn't weight them, but is there any that stood out to you that you might remember?
Oh man, that's such a hard question. I don't know right now. I feel like I want to think about this a little bit. I know. As I was writing this, I'm like, I really feel like the next phase of this is it ought to be weighted. Here's what I will tell you, like things to consider or watch out for that are major things. So anytime a button is not coded as a button is something that does an action on a page, like move a carousel slide, expand an accordion, shift a tab, or open a modal. If it's coded as a div, that's really bad. If it's coded as a link with like a hashtag in the href, that is also pretty bad unless they've given it a roller button and added screen reader support. So on the accessibility ready requirements, if you go look at that, there is a section on here that has a heading of controls with accessible names, roles, and states. These kinds of failures, all controls that function as buttons are coded as buttons or have a button role, those are pretty bad failures. So those are like one of the worst things. The other things that I would also watch for, and this I'll say, you can actually tell, where's my page? So Kadence isn't going to be a good example, but let me go to another one, Brizzy maybe. We actually made it possible to look at accessibility checker as a logged out user. I'm logged in right now, but you should be able to see this on the website and click it too. But I would say, like, if you go through this and you see like empty links or empty buttons, those could also potentially be an issue. So that might be something that is worth looking into. So like here, these are just images that link to social media. They don't have any sort of screen reader text. So those kinds of failures would definitely be a lot worse. And this was the thing that I had meant to show. I do have a summary of the accessibility checker scores in that Google sheet, so you can see them as well. But potentially what I would look at is not necessarily the past test percentage, but the count of errors is worth taking a look at, because a higher error count is pretty bad. So that, site origin here has a pretty high error count. And if we were to actually go in and try and see, what are those? Oh, maybe I opened it twice. Some of them missing alternative text. It means it doesn't have the attribute, not that it's not been filled in. And site origin is it's really old, but it runs on a lot of websites. And it's widget based. It's like before we had page builders, people used to build things with widgets, you know?
Yeah.
You can't control hardly any of this. So that definitely, it's kind of in the middle of my things, but if I started to dive into stuff like this, I might shift it down, right? First, like we had talked about, Oxygen didn't do very well, but it has all those controls. So maybe it actually ought to shift up a little bit. So this would be something to kind of look at is on this, and you can see all of this on the summary tab on the spreadsheet. There's the accessibility checker reports and like unique, but also I would look at like total error issue counts, those sorts of things. Average issues per page might be another number. So like SeedProd had 28, Thrive Architect had 30. So that might impact how you would try to weight and rank these as well.
Yeah, and you had the severity inside the accessibility checker too, which is helpful. So you can kind of cross-reference there.
Yeah, I don't know that it's all, that part is probably, do I even remember? I don't think you can see this on the front end if you go, I have too many tabs now. I'm like, where am I? We don't have severity on the front end right now. That is something that is going to happen in the future. So you probably can't see this logged out, but if you have Accessibility Checker Pro on your own, you could go reference those or look at our documentation.
Excellent. All right. Zach says, will there be less work for you next year just by making a duplicate of your multi-site setup and then updating the plugins?
I think it will be a lot less, yes. However, one thing that I've noted, and this is also really worth knowing, the vast majority of these builders, if they release an update, it only impacts new instances of the block. And this was something like Beaver Builder sent me, and they said, here's some betas, will you try them? If you already have the blocks inserted, you need to delete them and add a new one. Kadence is one of the few I've seen where they're actually having their blocks load through an API. So if they release a fix, I could be totally wrong about that load through an API language. Gotcha. If you are more technical than me, feel free to correct me. But if they release a fix, it goes out to existing instances of a block too, not just a new one. But a lot of the builders won't. So I may have to still rebuild that components page, but that's definitely way less than having to rebuild the entire website. In theory, I think just like a theme update would fix any issue in the theme.
Excellent. All right. Linda, was the testing done on Divi 4 or Divi 5?
It is on Divi 4. I requested to be a beta tester for Divi 5 a long time ago, and they ghosted me. I suspect they don't want me to have access to that. But my understanding is Divi 5 is more of a code cleanup than a code cleanup of legacy code on their end, not a code cleanup that impacts the front end output of things. So gotcha. I don't believe that Divi 5 is going to be any better from an accessibility standpoint from what I have heard.
Okay. So time will tell. Jason wants to know if you'd care to say which page builders really frustrated you.
Oh, to use?
You're welcome to say, yeah, you're welcome to say pass on that if you don't want to answer.
No, I can. Hold on. Let me look at the list for a second because I want to remember. Okay. So I think that Thrive Architect kind of frustrated me. SeedProd wins the award for the thing that was literally the most frustrating. And I had to go back and forth to ChatGPT, and then I had to screenshot my entire, I do love that you can upload screenshots to ChatGPT, and I'll show you what it was. And it's kind of hilarious, but in their website builder, theme builder maybe? Oh yeah. There's this little toggle over here, enable SeedProd theme, yes. And I had like all these built, they were published, and I just kept being like, why can't I see it on the front end? And it's like these weird little things, right? And finally I just had to, and they're like, you have to make sure they're published. And I was like, they aren't published, you know, like, so finally right. I like screenshot it. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And they're like, oh, you have to toggle it on. I don't know.
That's got to be
you
some
only
kind
have
of
to
legacy
learn that once,
thing,
I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, it was that. There was another one. I'm pretty sure it was either Thrive or Themify. I can't remember which one, but one of those two where every component in the editor, like if you click on a widget to edit it, you then also had to hit a save button. So if you just like click on the next component, it either wouldn't work or it would go to it, but then not save what you had done. And that was super irritating. Like I'm so used to builders like Elementor or Beaver Builder even, where you can click on something, do whatever you want, click on something else, do whatever you want, and it's still all there. Like I don't want to have to hit save every time I type a heading, and then I have to hit save, and then I can go enter a paragraph. Like that I thought was really annoying.
So on the flip side of this, let's say you wanted to go redo your own personal website. So not big business website making money, but your own personal website. Do you have a page builder that you would gravitate to right now?
Well,
I can't imagine it not being Kadence at this point.
It would probably be Kadence if I was going to pick a builder and I wanted a lot of those blocks. The thing that I like about my personal website, I actually redid it as my experiment. And the content's super out of date now because it was like a year ago. But as an experiment with full site editing, when I was trying to figure out how to make full site editing work, and there's still things about full site editing that I hate, I will tell you. But I just used 2024 and only core blocks. So one time I was troubleshooting something and I disabled every plugin and my homepage looked exactly the same as it does now. And I kind of really like that. And I feel like that would be an amazing direction if WordPress, like I was like, I'll just disable it on my live site because whatever, I don't care, right? And it was kind of nice that it didn't look broken.
Good point.
So I might just stick with core. But if I was building a business website, I wouldn't be able to stick with core. Yeah, I did write custom CSS. So, and it's pretty simple. It's not like super fancy. So.
Sure. All right. This is a good one for us to end on. You mentioned accessibility checker plugin, and somebody asked, what is the free plugin name? So while we're wrapping this up, and thanking you so much for not only coming here and sharing all this with us, but all the work you put into this report. It's awesome. It's a huge asset for the WordPress community to have something like this, and there's nobody else that's going to do it besides you. So I really appreciate you doing that, and I want to give you a huge thanks for that. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about Accessibility Checker, how it works, why people might want to go check that out, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah. So Accessibility Checker, if you're looking for it on WordPress.org, it's Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker. You can also download the free version off our website as well. If you just go to equalizedigital.com/accessibility-checker. And what it does is it provides you, this is the pro version right here, but it can do full bulk site scanning, and it will tell you about all of the specific issues on your site. And if we go into one, we could see, for example, here's our 3 images that are missing the alt attribute, and I can see what they are. I could go view them on the front and it will take me over. That was our front end highlighter that we were looking at. You can play with the front end highlighter on there. Well, that's weird that got real big, but nice big image. So you can see that, and it puts reports in the admin as well. The other thing, which we don't have these turned on obviously for this purpose, but we do have some automated fixes in our plugin. Many of these are in the free plugin. So doing things like adding a warning if a link is going to open in a new window or tab, removing tab index. If a couple of the builders actually failed this, where they had hard coded into the header that it couldn't be zoomed or scalable, which meant like on your mobile phone, if the text was too small, you wouldn't be able to like pinch zoom it. Sure. And that's, I don't know, I've done this on websites when I'm like, I can't read that. And so that can be an accessibility problem. So we have like a check that you could just turn on and it would fix that for you without you having to edit the code. So we have a lot of these fixes as well in the plugin. Adding skip links. So if you had a builder that doesn't have skip links, like Divi's one that we're remediating a Divi site right now, and we just went here and turned it on in our plugin. So
that makes it easy. And I will say, as somebody building a lot of websites, even if you just install the free one right out of the repo, I put it in my starter site, so it's just kind of always there when I start a new web build. but it's just going to remind you of things every time you start publishing a page. I'm not an accessibility expert, obviously, so I'll do something not thinking about it. And then when I go to press publish, I'm like, oh, wait, there's 3 things wrong on this page, and then I can go fix them. And it's so much easier to do that as you're building than to build out an entire website, build out 20 pages, get it proofed by the client, get everything approved, and then go, oh, yeah, I should probably check accessibility and start from scratch. If you just start doing this as you're building, makes things a whole lot easier, and having the accessibility checker plugin just makes it really easy to be doing that as you're going, because it's checking you as you're doing the work. So huge thing there, and go check that out and download the free one. Go check out the pro one. Thank you so much, Amber. This is awesome. I can't wait to dig into this even more. I want to go through a lot of these results and see what all I can find, and hopefully everybody got something great out of this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I didn't ask everybody to like the stream. I think I saw maybe Alicia asked in the chat there, so appreciate Alicia for thumbs up on the chat. And a huge thank you to, again, Amber, for doing this, and for your team allowing you to spend 200 hours on it. Well, allowing you, you know. We do appreciate it. From Tab, tell them thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kyle, and for being an amazing accessibility advocate as always.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not doing very much, but I'm glad to help out however I can. Okay, you stick around for 1 second. Everybody else, we'll see you guys inside the group. And if you have any questions, drop them in there. Amber jumps in every now and then, so maybe we can get some of those that you might have missed during this call. And we will see you guys on the next one. All right, bye-bye.